It's a big honor for us to go with you through the show. And we were thinking about what we would like to select and before. And our decisions are based on 2 points. One point is that we found in the main section some artists who could belong to the past future already because we found works from the 70s and 80s, and these artists are not so well known, but the works are perfect. And that's the topic of past future this year. So that's one decision, and as you can imagine, these artists are of our age. So I
Exactly,
mean,
exactly for our age.
exactly, because then we
It's
went to the
interesting.
biography, and both of them, one has the same birth year as my husband, and one had mine, and so it was really funny. And the second one is that we would like to show you a young couple from Litauen, and they had a show in Vienna in the MUMAG, and we were very fond of this show, and we have also a piece from this show in our collection. And when we saw that they are here now in present future, we
There are two interesting points. One is that the young couple is of the age of our children, and we realize that usually we are attracted by works either of our generation, contemporary to us, or contemporary to our children. And this is one point. And the other point is that we were fascinated that we learned to know this artist by an exhibition in a museum. So it's a very interesting role of the institution of a museum to teach you contemporary, what is contemporary and what is coming up, raising stars.
We will start with the section where we are here now. We go to Back to the Future, to a booth of Tucci Russo. And the artists that I selected are artists that I know also personally or have worked with, so I could tell you a little bit more. But let's move on. Yeah. Within this context of the art fair, artworks that offer some resistance into direct reading them. And here you have an artist called Jan Verkruijsen, who was quite known and more known now in the 80s than now. And it's an installation. It's not just many works coming together. It's one installational view here. And the artist is really interested in what the position of art is in society. And he was trained as a poet. He works with language, but he says art has no language, or there is no fixed meaning. He wants to offer some clues and leave it then open. And what you see is elements that refer to artworks like empty frames, like pieces of marble, but what's inside it is left open. He wants the artwork to be like a mystery or enigmatic for you to reflect on things. So this work comes, it's one work, it comes together. And separate elements, like there you have a copy of an 18th century erotic drawing. And like the notion of the erotic in art is the most difficult thing to represent or to how to bring it over. And what he did here is he doubled the image. So you have the mirrored image, which even closes it off more. So you have a kind of other representation. And I think this section of Back to the Future is really interesting. An art fair not just bringing the newest names, artists you know, but also looking back in many booths here around. And particularly here, I like it that it's just one work. It's not an overview or a selection of many works. The artist is worked for many years, and when I worked with him, what I also find interesting, he says art is so much about absence, presence, what meaning is, what art is, that he doesn't want to be present at his openings. He's not a public figure. He doesn't do like television interviews. He said, in order for my work to be there and to get meaning, I need to step out of it. And he's not present mostly at public gatherings. He wants to be at the side.
We found it very interesting that you picked up this piece. We would have never picked it up, and we probably haven't seen it until you have shown it to us. And I think that's very typical for a fair. And if you come as a collector, you don't see so deeply in these kinds. You need a curator to first understand the work, and then you see it, and then you discover it, and so on. So I find it very exciting to go this way.
So this is an older work of his. In our parcours, we can briefly stop at the other booth of the Tucci Russo Gallery, where you have a more recent work of him. Would be nice to connect it to something else.
The speciality of this gallery is they bring always new things. We would like to focus on Franz Warner. Franz Warner is the artist. He is as old as I am. And he made also the background painting. And these pictures are from the 70s.
Points and in some papers dispersion, and so it's getting really physical. It's just drawing on paper, but it's getting like a real object, and it reflects the light as well. So it's moving and very vivid in his drawing. And the whole series is called the Black Series. He made in the 70s. Maybe you mentioned that before. I don't know.
Yes.
So that's the material.
Maybe an interesting detail. Yesterday I was sitting next to him, and he told me that this technique was only possible because at that time the thick graphite drawing instruments were invented or produced, and so it was possible for him to go for these thick layers of graphite.
Yeah, what I find interesting is that it's not just a presentation of these beautiful works, but it comes together in this on-site wall painting that he made specifically. Yeah? And it does seem opposites, like colorful, round shapes, and then this more minimalistic black and white drawings. And I asked about, is this wall painting on sale? But it's not, it's just a background. Yeah, it's interesting too.
The technique for that time was very new when he did these paintings, but perhaps we can ask the gallery director.
It's not a special technique in a way, because it's so great because it's just graphite on paper with dispersion, and the technique is called drawing, but it's not. If you go a little bit closer, it's getting more like an object because it's really thick in the material, and also Franz used at some points and in some papers dispersion.
But I found it also interesting because the white wall would be perhaps in conflict with black and white pictures, and making the wall with such colors, so there is no conflict between the white wall and the pictures. I think it was a very intelligent solution by the artist.
Here in the middle of the gallery you see more recent work of Jan Verkruijsen from the series called Places, and while the other work was more about absence, this has more traces of life. It's the billiard sticks to play with, and these are empty boxes of wine, so it more relates to life and joyfulness or the play, but it's traces, it's just left over. What's interesting, I think, it's that it's in bronze, so it's completely all in bronze, but it's painted white to give it a kind of more daily character. I think it's about 20 years in between these works.
Now we arrived at PAKUI hardware, and this was the group we discovered during the exhibition installation in the MUMOG, the Museum of Modern Art in Vienna, and we were very, very fascinated by this work, and it's more or less on the topic between the interaction of high technology and the human body, and the invasion of high tech into the body. But maybe they arrived now, the artists.
My name is Neringa Chernovskaita, and this is
Ugnus Gelguda.
So yeah, it's kind of complicated. Basically, to quickly talk about this installation, we made one installation with industrial robotic hand before, and we had actual industrial robots moving objects in space and making installation. And then we kept looking and researching about industrial robots, how they're being used in different industries. And then we found that they are being dressed in uniforms, and they have clothing as well, different kind of clothing. It can be very sporty clothing with thin material, or very kind of heavy material like this, very, pleated Baroque type of clothing. And so for us, it was very interesting how clothing becomes sculpture, and at the same time, how clothing brings robots into human sphere. It's this kind of idea of protecting something that is vulnerable, something that is fragile. So when you think about robots, it's something that is definitely not fragile and something that can work forever and never tires. But then at the same time, you still want to protect them.
I'm very interested in this topic because I'm a professor for plastic and reconstructive surgery in Vienna. And in my research work, one of the main topics was the bionic arm. And we also went with technical equipment into the body, into the human body, to make it move and to be controlled from EMG controls from inside and so on and so on. And so surface plays a great role, not only to cover it and not only to hide it. It's also a question of sweating and a lot of problems which interfere with the technology, and so that's extremely interesting that we have just from another side an access to this topic.
Yes, you actually try it out, and
But
we just can talk
maybe you
about.
can also tell us a little bit on your political aspects of this topic and what you want to comment on our society.
Yes, I mean, we were very interested in automation as such, as probably you have heard of this term, of this already happening slow, or in some parts rapid replacement of humans by robots at work and everywhere. And we keep talking about this thing that people tend to think of it as it's something that is kind of saving you from work, but it's actually, on the other hand, it's going to be, some people are going to suffer even more, and countries that already kind of profit from that, they're going to just profit from that again, and this discrepancy between this developing and already developed countries in automation, it's going to grow even more. So with automation, some bodies are more vulnerable than others again. Basically, our method is always making these kind of hybrid assemblages, combining some found material with crafted things, and synthetic with artificial materials and things like that. So we have silicone with chia seeds that you eat for breakfast to stay healthy and fit. And this particular piece, it is made of automobile repair lamp. So it's something that you use to repair something that is broken, although it's supposed to work for you and, kind of help in your daily routines, with silicone kind of membrane that has imprint of human spine. So it's both things coming together and making this kind of almost hybrid small creature in a sense. And this installation is called Creatures of Habit. So it's this idea of how we are fixed on work, and our work is like the main social value for us. And with automation, we have to rethink this value again, because maybe work might not be the central value of the social life. So these are creatures of our habit. This is what we produce, basically. We always make kind of one body of work, but then they can be shown separately, and we show a lot of group shows as well, and each curator kind of selects pieces with their own kind of reading of it, of course. And they're open enough to be read in different ways, of course. It's just our fixed idea of it, but you can read it in a very different manner.
I'm honest that I don't know really about you, but where do you work or study? Have you got a atelier or?
We currently live in Berlin, but we also work a lot in Vilnius, from where we come from. And yes, we have a studio in both places. And some things we produce in Vilnius, some things we produce in Berlin. But mostly now we produce things in Berlin in our studio, most of it, yes. So it's very dirty.
In which part of Berlin, if I want to come to visit your?
Neukölln.
You're two. You're a group, more or less. And how do you divide your work? Who is responsible for what? The idea, for the perfection of the building up all the material and so on and so on?
We don't divide work. We always do everything together. It's I do all the talking. He does. He does.
She's talking.
No, he's taking care of the PR. Yes, I do all the talking. Yeah, that's true.
So this to me is another installation that it's not like immediately graspable. You need to dive into. It also offers some resistance. This is an installation of several works by Callie Spooner, an artist from the UK. And what she's interested in is in all systems that are happening in society that we are not aware of. How behavior, codes of language, how we interact with each other, how to express things, what is wrong, what is right, and also the pressure of society, of performing, of fitting in, all of that. And it's a really wide and open and difficult topic to discuss, and she wants to dive into several aspects. In the sound piece we mainly hear, it's about deconstructing language. You hear a person counting in Spanish, and at the same time buckets of water are thrown on his head, so they try to break the language. And it has something violence about it, but also something absurd or even funny. She often combines these things. And the other sound bit we hear, and it's a sound record that she made of a golf course, like people playing golf, like one of the most bourgeois thing that rich people do. And so you have you hear the golf sticks and you hear birds singing in the back. So you have this kind of portrait of nature of another kind of way of behavior or dealing with things and systems, which you hear. Also, like the specific speakers, which she got introduced to when she was working in Gatwick Airport. They were in a sound installation, and it made her reflect on how we are influenced all the time, and we are into these systems and taken into them. The other works we see here is fragments of a text-based work. It's an interview she did for over a year with a psychiatrist, talking about behavior, talking about how, from all these systems we have around us, how the body suffers from that, how the body reacts to that. They're diving into like the notion of hysteria, what it is, what are notions of stress, how it affects the body and the human language and all of that. The drawings you see on there are the parts of the body where elements that cause stress are produced, like in the stomach or in the brain, how we digest the systems that are around us, and how the body acts in different ways with society around us. I think here you need time to dive into the text, to hear it. There's a first level, but there's many other levels in the work. Callie also works a lot with performative works, where she presents live elements and things on stage, or many different ways. And an hour ago or so, she got the really nice news that she won the prize, the Illy Art Prize, for the best booth, I think. And and she will have a show in Castello di Rivoli next year. I think it also relates, in a way, although the outcome is really different, it relates to the previous artist, talking about systems, society changing, and how, we relate to that.
For us, it was also very interesting here again, and we are very thankful that you chose this artist too, because it's really difficult to come here and just, even if you take time, if you have not enough explanation about the background of this artwork. And I think it's very interesting because every time when you will see an artwork or from Kelly Spooner, then you can remind to this experience here, because then you know already a little bit about her art language she is using to express her thinking.
We decided to stop also in this area with drawings, and this is also an artist, Ferdinand PENKER, of the same age as we are, but he died 4 years ago. And we discovered him also about 2 years ago when a Viennese gallery showed him again after his death, presenting again Nachlass, the work he left behind. And so the gallerist who is showing his work now is maybe you can explain a little bit why you were attracted by this artist to bring him up again and to show him.
Ferdinand PENKER was a painter, and we are here in the drawing section, so we show works on paper, which is not unusual, but I would call him a painter, not, I think works on paper are quite he did that frequently, but his main work was painting on canvas. And nevertheless, you find a lot of very typical elements in the works we show here. This is one work. It's a group of 6 sheets, and if you look at it, pretty clearly defined shapes, which are set against a backdrop which is much more organically and also less controlled. So he works in this case, and he did that often also with his paintings, with very liquid media, actually with egg tempera. The structural idea is really to set clearly defined geometrical forms against a more organic, less controlled background. You find a similar structural idea in this early set of prints, etchings, and again you find clearly defined lines which are actually created by stop working around it, so the lines are basically the only part of the sheet that is not worked on, against a more chaotic, less clearly defined background. This is a work which is very unusual, and it's the only work of its kind actually that we show here. It's a so-called Rissbild, where it's obviously about space, and what he did is just take these very soft paper, and then he would work with rulers, which he would put around, and then he would rip it off.
He lived for a long time in New York and Los Angeles before he came back to Austria, and he was very influenced, for instance, by Sandbeck. And if you look on these edges here, then it will also remind you to Sandbeck, because Sandbeck's also defined room by just putting a line in the room, and the room is another room. And so he did the same with this paperwork. With this line, the paper is defined in a very different way than without. I think he did the same here, like Sandbeck with the room.
Of course, there are similarities to some American minimalists, But what is really interesting is that it's perceptually more complicated than you think, because it looks like an all-over. Many of his paintings look like an all-over surface, but it's actually the simulacrum of an all-over. So it's really like every little area is repetitive with little brush stroke and very fine brushwork, that makes him unique in my opinion. So he's interested in two traditions and fuse them in a very unique way.
So I think this was really an artist which was not accepted as when he was alive, and that was also the reason why we were fascinated and wanted to draw your attention to this artist.
It's also interesting in relation to the first artist that you picked, working with the lines and is that a specific interest in your collection, drawings, or the minimalistic?
Yes.
And then at the other hand, the technological, conceptual part of it. Yeah.
And painting, of course.
Yeah.
The three columns.
Yeah. If you don't have any questions, we'd like to thank you for your attention and joining us here.
Pleasure. Thank you for your attention.